the XS Noize Podcast with Mark Millar.
Welcome to episode 19 of the XS Noize Podcast. If you missed episode 18, our featured artist was Glenn Smith, and I was joined by former Creation Records boss Alan McGee to talk about musicians against homelessness and creation management. The show is not to be missed, and it's available with all previous episodes to download absolutely free on iTunes. Or, if you have an Android device, you can hear the show on SoundCloud, Mixcloud and Stitcher Radio, absolutely free. If you want to read up-to-date music news, listen to the best music and watch the latest music videos, then check out our website, which can be found at accessnoise.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Facebook.com/Access Noize Music and follow us on Twitter at Access Noize Music. On this week's show, I am joined by singer-songwriter David Gray to talk about his forthcoming greatest hits collection and first live shows in 2 years. So sit back, relax, and I'll see you on the other side. David Gray has announced his first UK dates in 2 years with a set of acoustic solo shows in support of his forthcoming greatest hits collection. Entitled An Evening with David Gray, the dates will commence at Manchester's Albert Hall on December 11th and include a 2-night run at London's Cadogan Hall on December 13th and 14th. The Best Of collection, issued a quarter of a century after Gray's recording career originally began, will proceed to live dates on October 20th. My guest for today's podcast is David Gray. Hi David, how's it going?
Very good, thank you.
When did you decide to pick up an acoustic guitar and start writing your own songs?
Yeah, it was with one of my best friends when I was at school. He got bought like a guitar for Christmas, and this little how to play the guitar record that you listen to, which had notes with it. And I watched him starting to learn how to play, and then coincidentally, my uncle gave my sister his guitar as a present. I don't know why he didn't give it to me. I got a football, but I commandeered that anyway. Took the football and then grabbed the guitar too. So, and I began to learn from my friend's notes that he wrote down of the chords and stuff. So this was probably when I was about 15, 16, and that's where it grew. And that was about a year or so after I'd heard Bob Dylan and really started to get into it when I was about 13, 14. So parallel to all the pop music I was listening to, I was blown away by the early Bob Dylan records that I heard, and just how powerful it was with just the lyric and the very bare musicianship, just a harmonica and a guitar. So I sort of, part of me aspired to being like Robert Smith in The Cure, and the other half was trying to be Bob Dylan, and that's how my songwriting began, with these rather awkward lurches towards gothic Dylanism.
So I would say maybe your earlier songs would be a mixture of sort of Robert Smith and Dylan?
Yeah, I would say they are actually, yeah. Yeah, they were absolutely ridiculous.
What other sort of stuff were you listening to then?
Well, the band that really got me started was Madness. When I discovered them when I was about 11, Nightboat to Cairo video came on the telly, and some kind of penny drop, and I've had the haircut ever since. So I discovered Madness, and then in quick succession the Specials, the Beat, and that whole sort of mod stroke two-tone movement. I mean, I was living in the middle of nowhere, so in those days there was no internet. It was just sort of word of mouth. You'd learn in the playground, oh, if you like them, then you should like the Jam, you should like this, you should like that. So I gradually picked up the pieces, and that was my first musical passion, that kind of music. But by the early 80s, when I was starting to learn chords on the guitar, I'd moved on to sort of indie music, I suppose. So the Smiths were very big, the Cult, the Cure. I like bands like the Cocteau Twins, the Cramp, and that was the stuff I was kind of poring over. Then the Blue Nile's first album came out. That was where I was at when I was first trying to write songs.
And what made you decide that you didn't want to do a normal job and you wanted to write songs and perform them as a career?
Well, I mean, I was very passionately into making pictures as well, art, and that's what I studied. I went to art college. I chose the path of least resistance. As a child, I was quite academic and did well in my studies until I got to about 12, 13. I discovered girls, pop music, ciggies, cider, everything. and all that stuff just fell apart. And it can't have been easy for my parents because I think I looked like I was going to do really well. and then suddenly I was like 9 weeks behind in my homework and I'd mastered, D minor. So I think for me, I think I've always had a need to express, even from when I was a small child. And I could theorize about why. I don't know. It's almost like a primal scream, kind of making sense of the world kind of thing that I've always had the need to make. And it's sort of, it went beyond the need to do anything else. So that it just, as I say, I worked out a path of least resistance. Like, I'm going to form a band. I'm going to go to art school. I'm going to form a band there. I didn't really have much worked out. I had a sort of weirdly sort of arrogant, kind of cocky kind of thing that I was going to break through somehow. But amazingly, I did, but it was very early on, really, that I had the bit between my teeth. And I remember the headmaster, when I formed my first band, we played at the school disco. And obviously everyone just thought we were awful because we were. But we were having the time of our lives. And in assembly the next day, he said, and the vacuums played, they played last night, and of course we'll be seeing them soon on Top of the Pops, won't we? And everybody laughed, and I thought, you bastard, I'll make you eat your
So it was
word.
the Vacuums then? That was your first band?
The Vacuums. So, so it was, anyway, that it was there early, and it was either going to be painting or music. And when I started getting to really writing songs when I was at college, I think I sort of made the decision then that was the way I was going to go. It just felt like it was more fun, I suppose. It was less solitary and it involved an audience. And I need bringing out of my shell in that way. And weirdly, I've always loved being on stage, even though I'm not very stagey as a person. So that was the way I chose to go. I put my paintbrushes down, but weirdly enough, I'm picking them up again next week because I'm going to be doing a live filmed painting. So God knows how that's going to go. I've just been buying all the canvas and the paint. So I'm really looking forward to it, actually. So I think it was going to be one or the other. I could never do a job. And I think at this point in my life, I'm completely unemployable.
What made you leave the Vacuums behind and go by yourself?
Yeah, I guess like every band at school, it was never going to be a lasting thing. We were just having a wonderful time making as much noise as we possibly could, and everyone was allowed to pick a few songs that we played. So I picked some Cure songs, and the guitarist wanted to play The Who and Led Zeppelin. Someone else wanted to play Jimi Hendrix. I picked the Cramps, but yeah, we were just having fun. And then I'd filmed another band when I went to art college. That was a bit more meaningful. We were called the Mellow Boys. And then we changed. We got a drummer. We called ourselves Waiting for Defo. But yeah, each time I think I've just got that singer-songwriter thing that it has to stay interesting and sort of develop and move on. And I've got the solitary singer-songwriter aspect to the way I look at making music. So I don't know. It's not like I was playing at it with the bands. I put my heart and soul into it. But at a certain point when I guess when doors opened for me, I went through them on my own. So, I was kind of ambitious to get there.
You went on to make 3 albums, A Century Ends, Flesh, and Sell, 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 before your career really took off when you re-released White Ladder.
Yeah.
Which was obviously a huge record. What made you keep going during those times, the first 3 albums, when they weren't being as successful?
It was difficult. I think first time round, Century Ends, I didn't really know what to expect. And the whole thing was just a great big adventure. But then the usual thing, it happened, and I lost the guy who'd signed me at the record company. The record company, Virgin, were taken over by EMI. All the people that I was supported by left, and it was like wilderness years began, and it was very difficult to believe that you were getting through to anyone was hearing your music, and you had a lot of jostling of opinions of you should do this, you should be more like that, you could be like, trying to get on the radio was obviously the holy grail, and it was sort of Britpop and the tail end of sort of dance culture at that moment, early 90s, and all kinds of other nonsense that was coming to the fore. but obviously that was never, none of that was, I was never going to be able to tag along with all that. So it just, what happened in Ireland, I think, was the single biggest factor, as well as my own reserves of sort of, I've got a determined side. So I thought, can I do better than I've done on these 3 records? Because really it was just an apprenticeship up until that point. I was learning how to use the studio, my voice, how to play the guitar, how to make a record, what it even entailed, what a reverb send was or a return. I had to learn all the basics. The whole thing was all hostile terrain, and I was negotiating it for the first time, the second time, and then, I got stitched up by record companies and all that stuff. It didn't work out, but I thought, can I do better? But all that time I'd had this connection that had happened in Ireland due to Donald Deneen and Donald Scannell, who put my first show on at Whelan's, and Donald Deneen, who was playing my videos. And I couldn't believe it when I went over and played my first ever show over there, early 94. Walking in there, I thought I must be at someone else's gig and my room will be out the back somewhere. But this was actually my show, like 250, whatever it was, 300 people crammed in. And they gave me a big roar going on the stage, and I never had coming off one. And I fell in love with the place. And that's really how everything got started. And that relationship, because I felt so strongly about what had happened to me, I was back time and again, just giving it everything I had. And it allowed me to grow and have the confidence that I was making a connection. Even though the sort of naysayers in the British music industry would say, well, Ireland's like a quaint backwater. It's got nothing to do with here and now. And London, mate, forget it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the UK is the toughest market to crack, I would say, myself. It's a very unforgiving place. So I was listening to all this stuff, and the two things seemed to be happening quite separately. But yeah, it was building the sort of cult nature of it, the intensity of the fans, the shows were getting bigger, and it kept me going. It made me a few quid every now and again when I went over there, but more than that, it gave me the self-belief, and it made it fun rather than just some horrible sort of drudgery, carrying the weight of your own work around on your back. People were taking it off me and running around and having a good time with it. That's what it's all about. So that was the key factor.
And then success came, and all of a sudden your music was everywhere.
Yeah, ubiquity.
And how was that? How was it trying to handle all that, this success?
It was difficult because I think it's unflattering in a way. I'm not someone I'm not a very mainstream kind of person. Having said that, I've never been part of the cool set either. I sort of sit somewhere in between the two. But my taste isn't sort of, I don't listen to, what's going on in the top 40. It's not since I was like 16 years old. So it's weird to be a part of that and sort of be blanded out by it all. But also there's phenomenal pressure of it, and just how idiotic that culture is once you get to the top. It's like it was a game that was something I just didn't really want anything to do with. And it took a while to learn how to exist and let it all be a part of my life, because it's sort of, if you're just there frowning, it looks a bit rude, really, when the world's rushed up and kissed you, but that's the way I am. I'm a bit of a frowner. So it took me a while to get my head around it, and really it was about reconnecting with the music. I think that White Ladder, we spent so long on the road. It was amazing. There was an absolutely incredible few years, but it was a sort of dislocating process as well, because suddenly we were like I was a massive article, in the world of, the music industry, and the whole thing, the way that people look at you, the way what they expect of you, and also the way that you feel. You start taking it for granted. You become a bit of I think it's inevitable. You become a bit of a twat, actually, because the show. Don't say that. Don't agree with me so readily. Because the shows are selling out, and you soon think that that's just going to happen indefinitely.
That's part of the job, as a pop star, rock star.
You've got to grow up. It's like a weird kind of puberty. Do you know what I mean? You've got to learn who you are again, but in public. And I still find it awkward, although I love being on stage. It's a vulnerable, exposed thing. And I think what I found hard was that my whole life was like that. It was all sort of in the public suddenly. And I found that hard. That was the hardest thing to handle. I still, when I look at people now with having great success, I don't envy them that part, because I'm so glad that my life is calmed down in that way, because I found it quite hard to contend with, the intense scrutiny and just the daft questions and the sort of, I don't know, just the whole thing. I found sort of difficult to get on with, but because it's really the music and the connection of the music. But of course, so much more comes with that. You can't just snip off the bits you don't like. It all comes as a big package.
Does songwriting come easy to you?
Winter howling at me. I adhere to a sort of disciplined approach, so I don't wait for inspiration. Although obviously, when it strikes, you get to a higher place more quickly, perhaps, than you do as you trudge along, just on a day-to-day level, trying to make something happen. But I think the key is to keep breaking open new areas of sound or writing that make it very, very interesting. So, but what I've realized is that means leaving yourself vulnerable because you don't quite know what you're doing. But basically, I find it's like the well springs eternal kind of thing. I find that there's just more and more there. I can't believe at the moment. It just feels like there's possibilities everywhere. I've never been more excited than I am at the moment with all the music I'm making. And once I get in the swing of it, it's a bit like I've got lots of canvases on the go all at the same time. So there'll be loads of different songs, and we'll be halfway through one song. Oh, hang on, this bit could work in that. And it could be this lyric, and then suddenly I'll finish a song which has just started, just without that much hard work and sweat. Certain things just lock in, and suddenly you pile up a lot of material. I love the process. I find life hard work, but creativity is very rewarding and renewing and challenging, and seems to be new. You're going around in a circle, of course, but it feels like it renews itself. And life, relationships, children, sort of mortgages, the whole package is complex and a real challenge to try and keep your head in. And you're aging, you get older, blah blah. But there's something about work that's just I can't live without it. I'll be working till I die. I mean, there's no question. I'd fall over without it. I frequently do.
And how often would you try and write? Would you try and write every day?
Well, I wish. Do you know what I mean? I wish I had the time. I'll write whenever I can engineer significant space. But just the commercialization of what I've already done occupies a certain amount of time. It makes demands. I've got this greatest hits coming out. There's some new tracks. It eats into your time and your head. You get all these different things you've got to do, this, that, and the other. They're good things. It means the world is interested and wants to know. But there's that. There's your family life. There's all the other bits you've got going on. There's just the day to day. I find it's a constant battle to get the space you need to do what you do. I wish. Well, I watched that film, Mr. Turner, and obviously he didn't even acknowledge his children. He just sort of did his thing. And then a part of me sort of envious. I'm like, yes, just to dream my dreams, to have my thoughts. But I'd be a bit of a miserable old bastard as well, a bit like Turner himself, if that was the way I went. So I treasure these other parts of my life, and I have to try and keep those plates spinning. But it's never easy to make time. Time seems to be. My manager's excellent riposte to me the other day as he was loading me up with another few things to think about, and I was just about to go down to the studio to start working on some lyrics. I was like, Jesus, no. There's not enough time, there's never enough time. Where's the time? He said, what do you mean? It's everywhere. All I can see is time. There's tons of the stuff. And I thought, yeah, good point, really. It's entirely how you choose to look at it. But I'm always feeling like there's not enough. So I'm always in a hurry. But yeah, I wish I could work more. I try and work at least 3 full days a week. And that means coming downstairs after breakfast and working till about 6:37, 7:30 in the studio. And you get a lot done, even if you just manage to do that every week. So, and then I'll be making notes, lyrics all the time, just waking up in the night, writing things down. It's once you're really in the swing of it, that part of me never sort of switches off properly, or rarely does, and that becomes its own sort of mania. So it's a sort of it's not very good for your health, all this stuff, but the rewards are bounteous.
Well, as you touched on there, you're about to release a best-of collection, which is, for the listeners, is coming out on the 20th of October. But in the meantime, there's an ever-evolving playlist on Spotify.
That's right, yeah.
Where fans can stream all your tracks. I mean, how did that come about?
Well, this is the age of the playlist, and obviously I'm slightly late to catch on. It was something I was approached about, and I said, but, I was skeptical, but then I went into Spotify and they sort of showed me kind of how it works, and they sort of explained in a little bit more detail. Well, I think anything that makes people interested in the music, and people forget what's there. There's an embarrassment of riches, but, just because they're not being made aware of it. And so it's just that. It's just like, hey, don't forget, you can listen to this. Just because you're presenting it in a slightly different way, it seems suddenly a bit more fun again. Everyone's ears and eyes and brains are in constant demand. It's a world of distraction. So I guess it's just trying to find a way that isn't too cheesy, that makes people want to engage with the music. And then it's also quite revealing. For example, there's a track on Spotify called Only the Wine, which was off Foundling, a record that hardly even raised its head in this country. It did well in the US. It got into the top 10 because Draw the Line before it had done well. But in this country, Draw the Line never got on the radio. So we were left high and dry. And Foundling, which was a sort of non-single kind of very much artist record, just sort of disappeared quickly after it. But Only the Wine, the lead out track on that record, has got like 9 million streams or 8 point something million streams or whatever. A phenomenal amount of streams for a track that I didn't think that most people knew about. And it must be that it's sort of on people's playlists. And so there were surprises, and they're always, I love the surprises when things that you're not expecting happen. So it allows the possibility that someone will surprise you, Well, for example, you'd think Babylon would be my biggest hit, but it's This Year's Love. That's my biggest streaming song. It's way out in front. And I presume it's on lots of smoochy kind of romantic, hey, sundown playlist or whatever, So
it was in the film as well. That's probably helped.
Well, it's in the film. I think it's in a couple of films now. So so I just think it's a way of engaging the world. And the world's changed, but the music's still there. You just have to remind them that it's there. So it's just a part of that process.
But it's also a useful tool for yourself to pick. Maybe it could help when you're picking set lists.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, I definitely will be trying to play Only the Wine next time I put the band together to go out and play some band shows, for sure, because I'm delighted by the fact that people seem to be enjoying that song.
And also in the new best of, you've recorded 2 new songs for the compilation, Smoke Without Fire and Enter Lightly. Can you tell me about those tracks?
Making Mutineers with Andy Barlow, it felt like we could take the whole thing even further. But he became involved in a really big project pretty much straight after Mutineers. So when he had a little bit of time, we got together and we started recording some new music, and I'd send him any ideas I sort of had knocking about. And he plumped for these 2 things. So we began working on them and finished them. But then pretty much straight after that, he became sucked into the other record he was making, to the point that it wasn't really possible to think of making another record with him. So I started a swathe of further recordings with a young producer that I met here in London. So, but so we had these 2 tracks that seemed really strong, like they were the beginning of something. So it seemed like the right place to put them was here, because I don't think that there's going to be an album to join them onto. So they'd just be sort of standalone things anyway. But I'm pleased with them. I think they have a strength to them, and hopefully they stand up for themselves.
And when you look back at all the songs that's on the best of, is there one song, if you were to pick one song, that would mean the most to you?
On the whole thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it wouldn't be very easy now. There's always a soft place in my heart for Please Forgive Me. It's probably the fastest song I ever wrote. But there's some kind of magic there. because just I remember it was the first track we mastered on White Ladder. So it was the first thing of that self-made, homemade record that we heard sort of complete. I remember when the sub kick drum kicked in at the end. I was sitting in the mastering suite, and and just live is such a monster track, and it's hard to know what else to do with that song. I reinterpret lots of songs, and I try and do so with that one. But it is just what it is, and so I'll give it to Please Forgive Me. I'll give that the nod.
Yeah, it's a good choice. You've already announced a string of shows before Christmas in support of the new compilation. Will you be adding any more?
It's possible.
No worries, dates.
All the dates haven't gone up yet for technical reasons, so everyone will just have to be patient. It's also just it's avails and just doing things like slightly short notice. So it's very possible that I'll follow this short tour with further shows next year, because I think it was important to do something, and I didn't want to get the band together because redeveloping the catalogue in some new way felt like a gargantuan task, and I haven't played solo shows in probably 20 years, at least not like this. So that challenge, and I've also I've got new sort of sonic strings to my bow in terms of just playing on my own, little bits of looping and stuff that I can use in the odd song. So there'll be a bigger sort of sonic dimension than just me standing there with the guitar to strum. So it's going to be a bit of an I'm a bit nervous about it, actually, because it's the decent sized venues. When I said to my agent, I said like 500-600 people, that kind of thing, and then they came back quite a lot bigger than that, most of them. But anyway, I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be really good, and it looks like ticket sales are looking really, really strong, actually. So it looks like it could be a bit of a vibe leading up to Christmas. I'm excited.
Yes, should be good. Just one more. Is there an album that you've been listening to recently that you could recommend to the listeners?
Well, I can recommend a couple of tracks in the sort of playlist style.
Okay.
I've enjoyed a guy called Clem Leak, The Lights of New York, and I'll have to put Bill Callahan in there. It's Bill Callahan singing. Jesus, I've forgotten a bloody name. It's a cover anyway. It's Bill Callahan does a cover. Kath Bloom of a Kath Bloom song called "The Breeze" / "My Baby Cries." So I've listened to that a lot. I got the new James Blake and the new Radiohead record. They're both good. But those two tracks I'd recommend. A thing called Despedida, which is this Portuguese word for goodbye, I think, or farewell or something, by Maria Rita. That's exquisite. So there's some listening there.
Nice one. Thanks very much. Well, David, I wish you all the best for the new shows and the new compilation. So thanks for joining me today. So David Gray, thanks very much.
Okay. Thanks
very much.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed the show. If you want to feature on the podcast or accessnoise.com, please get in touch at podcast@accessnoise.com. If you like the show, you can subscribe on iTunes, and it would be great if you could leave a comment and rating and tell your friends. Android users can listen at Stitcher Radio, Acast, Mixcloud and SoundCloud. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.
The XS Noize Podcast with Mark Millar.